I think being a bicameral legislature, you have two chamber, the House of Reps and the Senate, and each house appoints its own committee that is to undertake the review of the process. In previous assemblies, I think around the 6th or 7th assembly, I remember that both committees came together to work together and took a common approach. But in the 9th assembly, at the beginning, the two houses took different approaches. The House and the Senate, though working concurrently, but sometimes not in alignment. I remember the Senate conducting its own public hearing, the House of Reps on its own also conducting its own public hearing. So by and large, it requires the two houses, one, initiating the process where the committee appoints a team of technical consultants to support it to drive the process, where the National Assembly both chambers appointed their own committees chaired in the Senate by the Deputy Senate President and in the House by the Deputy Speaker of the House of Reps. And this technical committee supported the politicians to identify the issues for amendments, synthesize the issues, and present them to the committee for their consideration. The process was quite inclusive, if you ask me. It requires both committees calling for memoranda from stakeholders, identifying thematic areas that they sent to the public, and conducted zonal public hearings. I remember the Senate conducted the zonal hearings in the 6 geopolitical zones, and same with the House, where citizens were invited, including state government representatives, cultural groups, different stakeholders were invited to come and make presentation on those thematic areas. And I also remember they had a national level public hearing in Abuja, where national level stakeholders also came once again to make their presentation. And after that, the technical committee synthesized the issues that emerged, like I said before, presented them to the members of the committee, where they reviewed them, analyzed them, and voted on those issues. And this time around in the 9th Assembly, I also noticed that both committees worked closely with the speakers of the state assemblies, because they are also critical stakeholders in the constitutional amendment process, worked closely with them, invited them to a series of meetings where they participated, and that enhanced their understanding of the issues. I also remember particularly the Senate gave opportunities to stakeholders even after the public hearing to also come make presentations in their various meetings on specific issues, where those issues were synthesized. And at the end of the day, the Senate and the House committees sat together to harmonize their different positions and came up with bills that were decided together. And those bills were taken to the floor for consideration. And at the end of the day, those bills that were voted in favor, I remember about 61 or 63 bills were taken to the floor. Out of those 61, only 48 thereabouts were voted in favor. Those ones that couldn't meet the threshold were dropped, and these bills were transmitted to the state assemblies for their concurrence. And after the concurrence of the state assemblies, those ones that met the threshold, because the Constitution requires that for any section to be amended, the 24 houses of assembly, at least 24, must vote in favor. And those ones that met that threshold were returned back to the National Assembly, where they were collated and now sent to Mr. President for assent. That, by and large, was the process adopted. I think that's a very important one. In my view, Nigerians are already fed up. They are really getting tired of the constitutional amendment process, because in their view, it has not really dealt with the issues that really resonate with them. And most of them are getting fed up. Most of them have even indicated interest not to participate again. And it's based on these reasons that some section of Nigerians have even called for a total overhaul of the entire constitution to come up with a new constitution rather than the piecemeal amendment process that is currently taken. And if you look at most of the issues that were passed by the National Assembly and those ones that were even assented by the President, most of the issues were not as important to the citizens. For instance, local government autonomy was a very critical issue that they were interested in, but that didn't succeed. State police was another issue that a lot of people were interested in, that didn't succeed. Restructuring was another issue that a lot of people canvassed for, that didn't succeed. Other issues like state creation, reducing the cost of governance are some of the issues that citizens canvassed for. And the women issues also were very critical issues that came out during the last public hearing, but all those issues didn't succeed. So going to the 10th Assembly, I think we will advise the National Assembly to look at the bigger issues that resonate with Nigerians. And some of the issues, like I've mentioned before, Nigerians have clamored for restructuring of our federal system. And in restructuring, in my own, I'm not talking about political restructuring, but looking at economic restructuring. Looking how can we diversify our economy to make sure that the reliance on oil is reduced? How can we diversify our economy to ensure that citizens, Nigerians, benefit from the solid minerals and the abundance of minerals that are in various sections of the economy? But because states and communities don't have claim or ownership of these issues, and it's the federal government who in most cases does not even have the capacity to harness these issues, it's more or less like a no man's land, and it's in the hands of the federal government, while states that own these resources cannot benefit from it. So states have been asking for diversification of the amendment of the Constitution to give ownership of mineral resources to the states and the communities so that at least they can exploit these resources and use them effectively. Look at Zamfara State as an example. People call Zamfara a poor state because they depend on oil. But we have abundance of gold lying under the soil where illegal miners come to exploit. But the states don't have capacity, don't have the power or the authority to mine those resources because they are called federal resources and they are in the residual exclusive list. The state cannot mine. Same thing with crude oil. The Niger Delta community have been yearning for them to control of these resources and different. So people are asking for the devolution of powers to states to be able to control this, where they pay royalties to the federal government. That way, all states can start growing at their own paces rather than this feeding bottle system of democracy that we practice, where every state at the end of the month come to the federal to collect money. Another issue that have also come up clearly is the issue of security. People have been clamoring for state police, where states should be allowed to manage their security apparatuses while the federal provide coordination. But today we have a federal police that has not been able to provide effective security in states. We call governors chief security officers in their state, but they don't have control over the federal police. And this has created a lot of ungoverned spaces within the country, and this has also made the governors unable to be able to protect their territory. So it's one key issue that has come up, and I'm glad that Mr. President and the governors in their last meeting resolved for the creation of state police. But most importantly is strengthening subnational governance. Everybody is talking about Tinubu, everybody is talking about the state, federal government. Others are talking about the state, but what about the grassroots governance? What about local government? And I keep saying, even before the elections, whoever that wins the election will not be able to solve the problems of Nigeria because the most fundamental issues have not been addressed. Most of the cases of insecurity can be traced to the collapse of governance at the subnational level. Until local government, which act as the first line of defense for issues of service delivery, municipal services and security is addressed, we will continue to run around in circles. The collapse of local government is one of the reasons that has made people to migrate from the communities to the urban center, creating rural-urban migration, bringing people to these cities where they had no business to be. And this has also created an army of youths that have been recruited for criminal purposes. So we must strengthen our local government system. These are some of the examples of things that I think the 10th Assembly should take forward. I think two fundamental issues. One is how the gender issue has been framed. Nigeria is a very complex society with different cultural biases, different religious biases. So when you say gender equality, what does that mean? You've narrowed the discussion to man and woman. And you know, different religious backgrounds. The North sees the woman as somebody that should be at home, and you want her to be involved in political discourse. You want her to be involved in governance. How you frame that conversation must be in a manner that appeals to the religious groups, traditional groups, in a manner they see value in that conversation. But if you ask me, I would rather say gender issues should not be called gender, but we should change the language to social inclusion. When you change that narrative to social inclusion, you're talking about the daughter of the man and the woman. You're talking about their daughters, you're talking about their sons, you're talking about the aged, you're talking about the people living with disability, you're talking about different spectrum of the society. And what are those issues that really affect women, children, people with disability? If you ask me, one, poverty, hunger, lack of access. The woman in a majority of Nigerian population are traders, and most of the women are into one form of trading or the other, and also farming. How can they have access to agri credit? How can they have access to financial support to carry out their? These issues are more important to the women than having a seat in the National Assembly. Because how many people can have a seat in the National Assembly? And those ones who even have the seat in the National Assembly, to what extent are the women really helped project the issues of women? So instead of looking at issues that are about politics, we should be looking at service delivery. A woman is interested when she is pregnant, she should be able to have access to safe delivery, good medical care, where she can go to the hospital and get service. A woman is interested in the safety of her children. If her child is sick, can she have access to health care? A woman is interested in access to good education. Can she send her children to school without struggling to pay school fees? But the government is able to provide free education. These are the issues that affect women. What about the security? A woman wants to go out and come back safely. A woman wants her children to go back and come back safely. Not being kidnapped, not being raped, not being harassed, not being molested. These are the issues that affect. So creating an enabling environment for women to thrive and live a very fruitful life is what we should be talking about, rather than talking about pushing the conversation to creating more seats, creating political opportunities for women. Once you frame it that way, then you mean you are talking to a section of the women's society. If you call 20 women here, 19 of them will be talking about food. Only maybe one, who may be the enlightened one, who will be the politically conscious one, that will be talking about representation. So the narrative should be framed in such a way that speaks to the generality of the women rather than the few collective. And that is why, in most cases, when you raise issues of gender equality, subsections of the community will kick against it. I think because every geopolitical entity has its own specific context, every country has its own specific context and developmental trajectory. In most cases, we make the mistake of comparing Nigeria with other countries, and we draw a parallel, and we want to replicate what happens in other countries, what happens in Nigeria. But I want to maybe prefer contextual solutions and maybe give examples using Nigeria as an example. I remember in 2012, I was part of some advocates in the Southwest that were advocating for people with disabilities' rights to vote in elections. You want to INEC want to conduct election, and you create a single line for everybody to stand and vote. And somebody on a wheelchair or somebody with a walking stick, how can he stand on the queue? Do you give him privilege? Do you give him opportunity, or create a separate line for people living with disability to be able to access the ballot? When you create that kind of environment, people living with disability will want to come and vote. But if you ask them to compete with others who are sound bodily, then you discourage them from voting. So I remember one of the things we did was in Ekiti, I think using the Ekiti or Ondo State election, working with INEC, they created separate lines for people with disability and created some conditions to enable them to vote. That is one key way of encouraging people with disability to have access to the ballots. The second issue is the bills dealing with the acts on people with disability, living with disability, Those kind of laws create an enabling environment and protect the rights of people living with disability to have access to school, have access to healthcare services, they are not discriminated in when they are looking for job, and also have access to information. I remember recently Nigeria started introducing sign interpreters when programs are going on. That way people with disability, especially those who are deaf, can also hear what is happening. So those kind of legislations, those kind of policies and initiatives will enhance disability rights, will enhance their access to the governance process. Same with women, rather than maybe limiting it to, like I said, gender equality. It's a good thing, but the way it is framed, Nigeria right now is not ripe for those kind of mundane advocacy, that we should nuance it in such a way that speaks to the basic needs and rights of people living with disability and gender-related issues.
Okay. What role should CSOs play in ensuring that the Constitution review process adequately addresses the concerns of women and persons with disabilities?
Thank you so much. As civil society, they are not just respondents, they are agenda setters. I will always advise civil society not to wait for the National Assembly to call for public hearing before they engage. The lawmaking process moves in two ways, in three ways. A bill can emanate from a member, which we call member bills. It can also emanate from the executive, which we call executive bill. It can also emanate from the judiciary, which we call judicial bills. All right? Same with constitutional amendment bills. So if civil society have any specific issues that they are so passionate about, what I will expect them to do is to be take the initiative, approach very reform-minded members in the National Assembly ahead of the constitutional amendment process. Reform-minded partners, friends, whom they know that are in the National Assembly that have passion for the issues. Work with them, analyze the issues, draft bills for such persons for them to sponsor. That is the first. So they have helped the National Assembly to set agenda on those issues that they feel so strongly about. I remember the women-related issues, were pushed and advocated by civil society groups, and that passed through the funnel and set part of the agenda. As one, civil society should also specifically deal with issues that relate to service delivery, that relates to the welfare and well-being of the citizen, not just gender-related issues. But they should be agenda setters, they should engage proactively, they should just also be able to apply the required pressure. Pressure in this case is not by protest, it's not by revolution, but engaging the right persons, influencing decisions that are taken by the committee at very, very critical points. And most importantly, civil society should know that they cannot have it all at all in all the times. I'm a believer of incremental change. And I remember in the last constitutional amendment process, when the women issue, there are about 4 bills that deal with women-related issues. And I was advising some of my colleagues, can we take a stepped approach? We may not be able to get 100%, but can we start looking at maybe 50%? Negotiate with this 50%, maybe you may not be able to get the rest 50%, but at least you have started the process. And in the next amendment, you can now push for more. But if you want a wholesale change in one day and you want 100% or nothing, you are likely to end up getting nothing. So civil society should also be able to negotiate, be able to make sacrifices when needed to get incremental change rather than a wholesale change overnight. Thank you very much. I think that is very important, and that is one thing that the National Assembly has not done very well. For instance, we're talking about the 5th, we've just finished with the 5th alteration. We'll be talking about the 6th alteration. The 1st to 5th alteration that has been done, as the National Assembly has not been able to do an impact analysis to show how these amendments that are taking place over time has been impacted on the livelihoods of Nigerians. That will form a basis for letting Nigerians know, right, the importance of the process. But when you keep amending year in, year out, assembly after assembly, and you're not able to carry out an evaluation, impact analysis, people will not really be able to connect with the process. I'll give an example. The electoral process. Before now, we used to have pre-election matters that will linger for more than 4 years. Pre-election matters still happen when the member is already preparing for the next election. Pre-election matters, and this distracts the focus of the legislature because members are focused on tribunal cases rather than focusing on service delivery. Same way with governors, who will be battling and spending most of their time in courtrooms rather than focusing on governance. But the fourth alteration reduced the issue of the timeline for pre-election matters to 360 days, and within 1.5 years, all pre-election matters are dispensed with. This created enough room and for governance, for elected officials to focus on governance. The question is, to what extent has that amendment impacted or enhanced good governance? Same way with the opening of the electoral process, we've not been able to do that analysis. People with disability acts and those that are passed in various states, various state assemblies, there has not been any effective evaluation to be able to ascertain the impact of those laws and maybe even government programs initiated by, like maybe social investment programs that are undertaken by government. To what extent have those programs impacted on the livelihoods of women and children? If the National Assembly is not doing that, I will encourage civil society to take the initiative. I will encourage think tanks to take the initiative. For instance, if the National Assembly or civil society groups who are passionate about women-related issues or gender issues can do an evaluation to show the number of women, how the increasing or limited number of women in the National Assembly has been able to impact on the welfare of women, and use that as an advocacy that if you see 8 women in the Senate, for instance, have been able to achieve this, if we have more seats for women, perhaps they will be able to achieve more. That is evidence-based advocacy. If a woman, gender advocates are able to show that having a woman as a minister, right, or having more women as ministers have been able to impact positively on the livelihoods of women and people with disability, it will give them more slots. Maybe talking about the 35% affirmative action, it will impact more on women. That will be an evidence-based advocacy. So, carrying out the needed impact assessment, the outcome analysis, if not done by the National Assembly and if not done by the government, should be done by civil society groups to use that evidence to drive for the reforms that they so seek. So I completely agree that there is a need for that kind of assessment. Thank you so much. I think I like that framing. A more equitable and more inclusive future. What kind of amendments are being done by the National Assembly? Take an analysis of the issues that were passed by the 9th National Assembly and the ones that were signed by the President. One of them is financial autonomy for the state legislature. The other issue that was signed by the President, if I remembered, very, very mundane issues. Those amendments are not really, like I mentioned at the beginning, are not the issues that really resonate with the people. Nigerians have continued to call for the reduction in the cost of governance, to free up more resources to address issues of healthcare delivery. Nigerians have asked for more investment of more resources in healthcare, in education, right? In agriculture to enhance food security. Nigerians have asked for amendments for restructuring to create ownership, community-based ownership or state ownership of resources in such a way that each state is able to benefit from its natural resources, rather than this one that is owned, managed by the federal government, and the people who own this do not have a sense of belonging. And like I said, we must free up resources to take care of issues that resonate with the women. We must create systems and processes that meet the needs of the ordinary man. We must bring governance closer to the people, and the easiest way to bring governance to the people is by strengthening the local government system. granting local government administrative and financial independence, removing it from the shackles of the state government so that the rural dwellers can have access to those who are in power. How many women can travel from their communities to Abuja? How many women can travel from their communities to the state capital? But they know their councillor, they know their local government chairman. If this tier of government is effective, every woman, every person living with rural dwellers can access governance, can access service delivery that meets their own specific needs. Those are the kind of amendments we should be pushing for. And for people with disability, creating access for them to participate effectively in the governance process, creating access for them to benefit from the dividends of democracy, creating opportunities for them to be gainfully employed. So the system must be such that even if you are blind, the system takes care of you by providing you with either grants or social amenities that ease the burden on you. Those are the kind of wholesale constitutional amendment or reform processes that we should be pushing for. I think this is a very important question, and I've made this, I've shared my thoughts with some of the key drivers of this process. Like I said, they must make the process more consultative, they must make the process more participatory, and they must adopt a stepped approach. And I ask, why is it that most of the bills passed by the National Assembly, out of 44 that were transmitted to the President, less than 1/3 of them were assented by the President? Why? If you do a careful analysis, you will find out that the process of consultation was limited. The President, as the father of the nation, must be involved in the conception of the constitutional amendment process. He must be involved in setting the agenda from the beginning. So I expect that the 10th National Assembly, before they start sitting down, they must pay a courtesy call on Mr. President to seek his input, to seek his views, and to inform him formally that the process has commenced. The President should not be invited to a public hearing to come and make his presentation. The Governors Forum, as critical stakeholders who determine, in most cases unfortunately, the voting patterns in the State Assembly, and who are the custodians of the governance architecture in the state, must be consulted. I give an example. The governors in the last amendment wanted state security or state police, but at the end of the day, they didn't get that, and the National Assembly didn't provide an enabling communication, an effective communication to give them feedback why that state police did not go through. It was a slap on the face. So this time around, they must, from the beginning, consult with the Governors Forum, seek their inputs, collaborate with them, partner with them, including the Conference of Speakers, the Judiciary, the Nigerian Bar Association, and other critical stakeholders involved in civil society groups, so that people can make their thoughts known from the beginning in setting the agenda before the National Assembly start articulating those issues, before they go to the, and when they are going back to the public hearing, they are going back to the public hearing with predetermined bills that go with predetermined bills that are product of consultation, and you are asking their views. These are the bills that we have developed. What are your thoughts? Are you happy with them? What do you think about them? So that they will be giving you feedback to help you take informed decision. But most importantly, there must be an effective feedback mechanism to the citizens. The gender issue, for instance, women clamored for, including the wife of the former president, clamored for these gender bills. The National Assembly should provide an opportunity to give feedback to the citizens why those bills failed and what they can do better next time. A lot of people ask for state police, state creation. Did the National Assembly go back, the 9th National Assembly go back to them to tell them why it failed? They asked for local government autonomy. Did they go back to tell them why it failed? They asked for restructuring. If you didn't do that, why should they take you seriously now that you want them to come back for that same process? There will definitely be apathy on the part of the citizens, just like they have voter apathy in the 10th. So if they want citizens to turn out en masse, they must be more consultative, they must create opportunities for citizens to participate effectively, and they must also take these issues seriously.